We go ahead and get started. If you all please rise while we have a prayer, and I'm going to ask Commissioner Williamson if he'll lead us please in the pledge.
Please bow your heads. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this time to come together to do the county's business. We pray that this morning we will handle our jobs with respect for one another and that we will listen and be courteous to each other. We pray for our friends to our east, Lord, that are still recovering from Hurricane Michael, and we know the challenges that they face. We pray that this community would continue to be generous in supporting them, and then we would put our thoughts and prayers with them. We see that our first responders are here with us today. We pray that you keep them safe, as well as members of our military that are out throughout the world doing their jobs. Thank you for this time together. Amen.
Amen. Please join us in the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, good morning, everybody. If you'll please put your phones on a silent or stun mode, please. So we don't get interfered with this morning. Before we get started on our regular agenda, I'm going to ask Brad Baker, come up. He's going to give you an update on the work that Santa Rosa County did in helping our neighbors and overcoming some of the tragedy that we've seen over the last few weeks. Brad, please.
Good morning, thank you. And I believe Brandy is going to put some rotating slides up on the PowerPoint. I believe we're going to come back and do another little presentation at the next board meeting, but we just want to kind of recap that, you know, we did a lot for Washington County, some for Bay County, and some for Jackson County, and just want to kind of highlight and let the board know that, well, first of all, other than the Sheriff's Department, which I believe they're going to bring most of their folks back today, if I'm correct, Sheriff. So our Sheriff sent around 17 folks over to Washington County to help with the law enforcement support on that side, sent another contingent down to Bay County and help with that side. We sent dispatchers to Bay County. We sent dispatchers to Calhoun County. We sent emergency management assets to Washington County to help with their command and control and transition into recovery. And we sent a fire strike team. Midway sent some folks, Navarre Beach, Skyline, Allentown, and the city of Milton. We sent some public works folks, not only a contingent from Santa Rosa County, but the city of Milton also sent a crew over there with some machinery to help out as well. And you can see from the slides that we were very active over there. The Washington County board and sheriff and EM were very pleased with us able to help them get to recovery. One of the fastest counties to get to recovery from the disaster. So we were glad that we could help, and I guess the only other going forward, the state has asked myself and Brandy is still engaged with Washington County doing PIO stuff. So for the next couple of weeks, I'll be engaged with some regional area command stuff with the state, and Brandy will continue to be in PIO. But other than that, you know, most of our assets will be back in the county now, and we just thank the board for the opportunity to go and help. It was a devastating hurricane for those folks over there, especially in the rural counties who had not experienced anything of this magnitude, and they were overwhelmed right out of the gate. So thank you for the opportunity. And then you know, I didn't personally get to go to Bay County, but I know talking from our chief deputy back there, McCurdy, it was pretty wiped out down there. So we were able to send some of our fire strike teams in the north part of Bay County and help those out. And you know, they're going to have a long time recovery in that part of the region. So we were very blessed that hurricane took that eastern turn. And I will tell you, from lessons learned over my last week and a half over there, while I feel like we're strong in Santa Rosa County and we've learned a lot from Ivan and Dennis, there are things that they experienced over there that we did not experience in Ivan and Dennis, and I'm going to bring those lessons learned and make our county stronger for that Category 4 or 5 storm that hits our county. So other than that, I'll answer any questions you'd have.
Brad, certainly want to thank everybody that responded, you know, emergency services, the sheriff's office, police force, fire departments, public works. I mean, it's, you know, the biggest thing I seen in this whole event that I didn't like was people saying, well, we dodged a bullet. We didn't dodge any bullet. We're all Floridians. We just, you know, we didn't get the direct hit, but it affects all of us. And I just thank God that we have strong people that can go out and help our neighbors. And that's really, when it comes right down to it, that's what life's all about. Everything else is meaningless when it comes to life. And I just want to, on behalf of the board, thank you very much for your leadership role in this. And you know, can't say anything else. That's about it. So.
All right. Thank you.
Right. Anybody else? Thank you. Brad, thanks. All right. Very humbling to know that we can respond like this. So. All right. This morning's information only item. First thing here. Well, first I'll ask if there's any changes to today's agenda. Any additions?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to add an information only for item 14 on the administrative committee, please.
All right. All right, Mr. Spencer. Anybody else? All right, Mr. Parker.
No item to add to the agenda, but I guess this would be the most appropriate time. I'd received a phone call from the chairman, Commissioner Trey Hawkins from Washington County BOCC, and he just asked me to please convey to the board today their heartfelt appreciation for Public Works, Emergency Management, Sheriff's Office, Fire, and he echoed what Brad said here today. He said, honestly, we were just overwhelmed and we couldn't have done it without y'all. And he said they are indebted to us and he wishes he could be here today himself. They're still obviously actively cleaning up, but he asked me to please convey that to the board, that he really appreciates each and every one of your support to allow Santa Rosa County to mobilize and send help over there.
Well, thank you. Anything else? All right, we'll move on. First item we have is information only. On Thursday, October 25th, 2018, we'll have a proclamation for National 4-H Month. And that's appropriate this week because tomorrow is farm tour. So anybody that gets a chance to go on a farm tour. Another information only, a public hearing is scheduled for Thursday, October 25th, 2018 at 9:30 a.m. for the following: proposed ordinance related to boating regulations and restrictions for Polynesian Owls Canals, and also a proposed ordinance amending ordinance number 91-21 related to the Santa Rosa Shores Canal and canal maintenance and improvements and municipal service benefit unit. So we'll take those items up on Thursday. Another one on Thursday for your information that is scheduled also will be a community health in Northwest Florida and also interfaith ministries. So we'll have a full agenda on information items on Thursday. This morning we have a presentation from Florida FWC. Who's here this morning? Okay, you have the podium.
I want to thank the board for inviting me to come talk about bears, especially given what's all going on in the Panhandle right now. I do appreciate the time. So I will be coordinating with Mark about how I'm going to advance my slides here.
Right.
My name is Dave Telesco. I'm the Bear Management Program Coordinator for Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission. I'm out of Tallahassee. As you know, we have a lot of bears in Florida, over 4,000. But in the West Panhandle, there's not as many. This is one of our smaller populations. The estimate we had in 2016 was 120. And so I want to explain why or how that could be possible given all the calls we have. So the next slide This is basically the range of bears in the area. You can see where Santa Rosa County shows up. Go ahead. That's the home range of one male bear, 135 square miles. Okay, so they're not territorial, so they do share. So you'll have a couple of males will be overlapping, and then you actually have females at 35 square miles. So it doesn't take much, go ahead, for these animals to go across the landscape and encounter, multiple people, okay? So this is our calls. These are just 3 years, 2016, 17, 18, from January to mid-October. As you can see here, while we have calls in about half of the county, it's this lower half, go ahead, that has the highest density. And that's one thing that I will say, Santa Rosa County is leading the state when it comes to recognizing the importance of keeping trash secure from bears. It's one of 4 counties that has an ordinance that requires this. This is a big deal for us because without a community-wide effort, and if just a few people do it in one neighborhood, we're not going to have the impact. And so by having an ordinance, the county is basically saying, look, we recognize this is a big deal. This is a community-wide effort that we need to have. And it helps the citizens because they see it's a county effort, not just a state-level effort. So this whole area in purple, that's the highest density call area, and that's also the area that has the ordinance, which, again, is going to be helpful for reducing conflicts. Most of the time, people are not foolish enough to do what that lady is doing on the bottom left. Unfortunately, we have caught people intentionally feeding, which is illegal. But most of the time, it's other things. Folks who just have their grill out that they didn't clean after they grilled. Bird seed is another surprise for a lot of people. Folks leave cat food out for the neighborhood cats or whatever. All these things bring bears into neighborhoods, and we end up with some conflicts. So these are just Santa Rosa County, and again, January to October, so we're comparing apples to apples. You can see calls have gone up quite a bit. 2017 peaked, and then we're a little bit lower now in 2018. Go ahead. And when you look at these numbers in white, that's the percentage of calls statewide. So for example, in 2014, 6% of all calls we got from FWC came directly from Santa Rosa County. That went all the way up to 14%. In 2018, Collier County is our lead county, followed pretty closely by Santa Rosa. So we're getting a lot of calls generated from Santa Rosa County compared to other counties. And so looking at a typical year, we get about 500 calls, again, average. 64% are saying, I've seen a bear in my yard, I've seen a bear in the area, it's up a tree. A full quarter of them are specifically saying a bear is in my garbage. So they're identifying the core reason why the bear is there. 9%, we go out and visit the person. We don't know why the bear is there. We don't know what's going on. Is there something drawing the bear in? We might canvass the neighborhood. So we go out and talk to the neighbors about, yes, that's a bear in the area. This is what we want to do. 4% are non-compliance. So we've gone out, law enforcement has issued a letter that basically says, look, what you're doing is actually illegal. And if we have to come back, we actually have to give you a citation. So this is not an official law enforcement action, but it is a notification. So the next step, if law enforcement has to go back again, is actually citation. So again, 4% of those are the non-compliance. And then 2% are a trapping effort. This is going to be surprising to a lot of people because I think most folks, not just Santa Rosa County, but anywhere, when they call, they're expecting a trapping effort. Go ahead. And this is the reason why. We can catch the bear, and then we'll catch another bear, and then we'll catch another bear. And because the bear is a symptom of the problem. The problem is we have food that's out for bears, raccoons, possums, rats, anything else to get. And so unless we eliminate the bear population, you're going to have bears in and around communities if we have stuff exposed to them and easily accessible. And so that is why it's such a low rate, as in why we're catching. We can't move bears out of state. No one wants our bears. They have their own bears to deal with. And we have a pact with the 15 southeastern states that no other states can accept the other states' bears. We did a study, and we found that 70% of the bears that we moved, they leave. They go somewhere else. Sometimes they come back. Other times they go somewhere even worse. And we're basically having repeat offense at about 50%. So if we pick up a bear that's causing a problem here, now we're making a problem somewhere else. So what we want to do is address the issue versus just move the bear out of sight, out of mind. We've had, fortunately, only 15 people in Florida have been actually injured by bears. Given that we have 6,000 calls a year, I say that's fortunate. But we don't want any of them having this interaction. And so we actually had one in Gulf Breeze. This is the first in this area. That was January 28th, 2017. What happened in that case is very similar to what's happening around Florida and around the Southeast. It's a bear that's been around in the neighborhood. It's a female with young, and a dog is involved. So in this case, the gentleman's dog went after the female with young. He went after her to see what was going on. The female scratched him in the face. Then he proceeded to smack the female around with a stick, and she hit him. So you've got young with female with young, you've got a person and her dog, and you've got some sort of intentional interaction. Fortunately for this gentleman, there's some stitches, and he's all right. And again, that's the fortunate part of it, but the unfortunate part is that, we want to avoid these happening at all. So there are three main areas that we work on when we're trying to deal with human-bear conflict. You've got deal with the bear itself, deal with the public behavior, and deal with the bear behavior. So as far as bear removal goes, your options are trap and relocate or trap and kill. And I talked about the elements for that. We will try to trap and kill any bear that we think is a public safety hazard. So if that bear is displaying behavior to us that is a safety hazard, there's no let's pick up the adult bear and try to rehab it. We catch it and we put it down. And we do that for probably 40 or 50 bears a year get put down for that. Trap and relocate, sometimes we do that. If it's a wayward bear, shows up somewhere that we don't typically see bears, we might try to catch them and put them somewhere else. But there's really not many places that allow us to put them. Blackwater River State Forest won't take them. Basically, Eglin Air Force Base is the only option. And as you guys know, there's probably as many bears on Eglin as there's going to be, period. So we don't see that as a really good option. Public behavior, again, that's where we can get the most leverage. We have papers published basically saying once we have a community that steps up, you have a reduction in conflicts. Hurlburt Airfield is our best example. There's 70% reduction in conflicts. When everyone's doing the right thing, we've got the waste stream secured, and we've got security forces trained. So everyone knows what's going on, they know how to react. Compliance measures, and again, it's got to be something that everyone's doing. What a recent study showed us 60% of a community has to be doing the right thing to dissuade a bear from coming in. It doesn't have to be 100%, but it needs to be the majority of the folks get that this is serious and they have to do something about it. And so we have to have some measure of enforcing that. And then as far as the bear behavior is concerned, reinforcing their fear of people. As intimidating as bears are looking, they actually are pretty skittish of people when they're a wild animal. Go ahead. You'll notice I didn't mention hunting. We haven't hunted bears in this area since 1958. Basically, hunting is used for population management. Typically, it's for stabilization or reduction in a population. We've done multiple studies that have shown that if you don't have 200 or more adult animals in a population, that it's at risk for long-term sustainability. So that's why we haven't hunted since '58, and that's why we don't see that on the horizon. Any future growth, though, we don't anticipate is here. Eglin Air Force Base, as you saw, 135 square mile home range, that's because there's not really great habitat. You'd have to be in Yellow River or Blackwater River State Forest. It'd have to be basically north where the bears have different habitat and there's a lot less people. So we're not, I guess what I'm saying from an agency standpoint, we're not saying we should have more bears here. We're saying in the northern part of the county, in Walton and in Okaloosa and in Santa Rosa, where they can actually accommodate that. And again, we have enough studies both in Florida and outside of Florida that shows securing the attractants works. And again, the bears are the poster child for this, but people aren't calling about all the raccoons and possums and rats and everything else that are coming to these sources and creating issues. Bears are just the most visible. But, you know, in Okaloosa County, we did our modified cans, which have the gate hass on them. You can see in the picture on the bottom there, 55% reduction in the Willow Bend community. And then the bear-resistant cans, we had a 95% reduction. So, again, if there's not a food source, the bears don't have a reason to be there. We've actually dispersed over $2.1 million to local governments to help with bear-wise efforts, and that's resulted in a lot of cans, 13,000 bear-resistant cans, over 10,000 sets of hardware, dumpsters, sheds, electric fencing, and 69%, almost 70% of those funds go to places that have ordinance like Santa Rosa County. That's important because what the legislature has set, not us, but the legislature has acknowledged that with ordinances comes that community-wide benefit. Places that don't have ordinances, it's all elective. So I might want to secure my trash. Well, if I'm only 2 or 3 people in a neighborhood of 100, you're not solving the issue. It has to be a community-wide effort, and that's why the ordinance money goes to you guys. Speaking of which, $128,000 have gone to Santa Rosa County. That's almost 4,000 sets of hardware. Most of those are in Holly by the Sea. There about 700 or 800 have been dispersed. They're still getting that hardware out, so we're still going to wait on seeing the effects there. But we got dumpsters at schools, daycares, senior center, the YMCA, all that's in the coastal area. And then this year's grant is for the dumpsters. So we're anticipating 97 dumpsters at restaurants or anything that's going to draw bears in to address that. And then we've also done some, early on, we did some sheds where basically you can secure your regular trash can in a bear-resistant shed. And again, the compliance measures that are so important is it's kind of like if it's a flood zone, you're telling everyone, hey, it's a flood zone. This is not something you should be like, well, maybe there's a flood zone. You know, if FWC just says, hey, maybe you should put your trash up, that's different than the county saying, this is an important issue that the county recognizes, you really need to do it. And it makes some folks who may not comply more likely to comply. And again, it's that community-wide effort that we want. And so not only do we have a state law, now we have a county ordinance that is backing that up. So we've got 4 counties, Santa Rosa, Seminole, Lake, and Orange, and City of Fort Walton Beach and City of Apopka have ordinances. And I'll mention that Seminole County has had an ordinance the longest time. They used to be the lead. They are no longer the lead. We have, I think they're the 6th or 7th now in the number of calls that are coming to FWC. So the word's out. Folks are very aware of the ordinance. They're aware of the funding that's coming with that. And so it's helped a lot. And again, this idea of addressing bear behavior, a lot of folks are like, yeah, you got to be kidding me. How am I going to scare a bear? Go ahead. That's a cat. Okay? So that cat treat that bear twice. And if you're ever really bored, go ahead to YouTube and say cat chasing bear, and you will see a lot of videos. It's about attitude. So these bears, they can remember that they're supposed to be afraid. And again, 90% of the time, if it's a wild bear, it's fight or flight. They're thinking flight. So that's what we want to reinforce. And the public is allowed to scare bears. They can use air horn, paintball gun, slingshot. That yellow thing that looks weird in the middle, that's called a water scarecrow. You stick it in the ground, put your hose on it, and anything that breaks that infrared beam is going to get squirted with a super soaker. So that works. Again, critter getters is kind of the same thing. Go ahead. And then we have actually trained Santa Rosa County Sheriff's officers, Gulf Breeze Police Department, and Eglin Air Force Base Security Forces on how to do enhanced hazing. And so that's shotguns with less lethal rounds, pyrotechnics, starter pistols. So basically, these folks are able to do this enhanced hazing that our officers as well do. And that's effective in, again, reminding bears that they're supposed to be afraid of people. So there's not just a neutral or a positive interaction. When they see a person, there's going to be some sort of negative interaction. And that increases public safety. So what we want to see basically is we recognize that Santa Rosa County is going to have bears. But we want it to be like this. We want the person opens the door, all they're seeing is the bear run away, because the bear has no reason to hang around, and the bear has that instinctual fear. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
All right, questions from board members? Commissioner Solder.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for the presentation, and I'm glad my wife didn't hear your story about the cat.
Chair?
Commissioner.
I was wondering if we were going to use feral cats to solve the bear problem there for a moment. But if you would define safety hazard, you mentioned earlier that only under certain situations that you had deemed a bear to be a safety hazard. Could you help me understand what would reach that threshold?
Yeah, I mean, so basically, as I said, with 6,000 calls a year and 15 people being injured by bears over history in Florida, we feel very confident that our standards for what a safety hazard is going to be is pretty well dialed in. If we have a bear that you are unable to scare away, that has lost its fear of people, we go in and we try to catch them. And I say we try to catch them. There are bears that we're not able to catch. But our presence there and our continued attention typically end up driving the bear away, or we actually have a beat on it in a different neighborhood, so sometimes we do catch them. But bears are completely unafraid of people. You cannot scare them off. If they've entered a building, entered a vehicle, entered a tent, injuring an animal in an enclosed yard, things that are tips to us that something in that bear's brain has crossed the line where they don't respect that safety hazard or proximity to people, basically, is when we say, okay, now that's now a safety issue. It's not a question of if it's in a neighborhood, it's automatically a safety issue.
But it seems like it's very reactive from the standpoint of everything you described there would be behavior that you're noticing after the fact that would then reach that tipping point of wanting to relocate the bear. And in reading the report, what are we, like 2% in Santa Rosa County relocation?
Mm-hmm. No, that's 2% statewide.
Statewide.
I mean, it's also, while it's 2% for Santa Rosa County, that's also statewide. So
okay, yeah, so
what we're doing here is reflective of what we do statewide.
That was going to be my next question. So the relocation of 2% in our county is not low or high, it's
the same.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. A couple things, and I've had staff, and we drew up a letter and sent it to your office. And,
I'm aware of that letter, yep.
all right. You made a statement that we cannot ship bears to other states, but I have and not a proven understanding, but I've been told that like some of the Appalachian states want bears to repopulate some of the forest.
That's incorrect.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate that because I didn't get that answer back. Even though we use these cans, there's an extra cost to the citizens for the guys having to get out of the truck. And then I've also had some emails lately where, keeping the trash in the garage, a lot of HVAC systems now are located in the garage of homes. So naturally you're carrying the pleasant odors of the trash all through the house. So that's
right.
One complaint that we're looking at. Are bears being relocated to Eglin from southern portions of state of Florida?
No, we try to keep bears within the same area. So the only bears that are going to be on Eglin is Okaloosa, Santa Rosa, Walton. I mean, we don't try to move them across state or anything like that.
What is Blackwater's state forest problem with putting bears in the state forest? I know we got a lot of recreation in that forest.
It's not the recreation, it's the inholdings. While on the map it looks like a giant forest, there's a lot of inholdings and a lot of people. And so nowhere near the density of people you guys have in the southern portion of the county. But as a state forest, you know, they try to have a good relationship with our in-holding folks. And, you know, we work with them as a partner agency, but we can't make something happen, and they're not willing to accept bears.
Well, I think that's something that our state representatives need to be aware of, because if I live on the peninsula in Gulf Breeze, I don't expect to see a bear in my backyard. If I live in the middle of Blackwater Forest, you know, I kind of would think there's going to be deer and bear out there, and I ought to be prepared for that. So that's
I understand.
something that I appreciate. Perhaps we can
Yeah, absolutely.
get to our legislatures about handling that for us.
Yes, sir.
And then finally, I've never heard yet of a long-term plan. I mean, I know we're laying out a lot of good things, a lot of things we can do, but the population's going to increase. Without having a controlled hunt or whatever it is, there's going to, I mean, our number isn't to that point now, but, you know, mom and daddy bear are going to continue having baby bears.
So I think what I will go back to is something you said, that the idea that you're on the peninsula, you shouldn't see a bear in your yard. This is a regular thing. And I understand people don't want that to be a regular thing. The only way that that won't be a regular thing is if garbage and everything else is a past tense. We don't have that available. So the bears don't have a reason to come off of Eglin, come off the reservation, and forage in neighborhoods. Otherwise, we'd have to hunt the population to almost extinction because, again, 135 square mile home range, they can smell over a mile away, they will come to the peninsula. So the expectation of, I don't think I should be able to see a bear in Navarre is not going to happen. The long-term plan that we have is that when bear populations are at sustainable levels, that is a consideration for our commissioners to make a decision. So we do have a long-term plan for bears. In this case, our long-term plan is for bears, whether we move them there or they go on their own, is on the northern part of Okaloosa, Santa Rosa, and Walton, that they start populations in the Yellow River and Blackwater River State Forest, whether we move them or not. And then that population will mean that there's at least 200 in this area. But as far as a long-term plan, the long-term plan is garbage. And I know for a lot of people that's not, that it doesn't compute, it doesn't make sense to them. But the reality is, with garbage available, if there's 10 bears on Eglin, one of them's probably going to wander off Eglin and find garbage. So, but if it's regularly not available, that's a trek they don't have to make. And it's much easier for a bear to knock over a garbage can and get a lot more calories than to spend all day picking up individual acorns. It's just more calories, so it makes more sense. So the long-term plan is Santa Rosa County is bear-wise. They know what attracts bears. And we have a longer-term vision of if the population gets to the point where it's sustainable, if our commissioners, and this is what the folks want, then that's something we can do. But that's not where we are.
Well, but how do you curb that instinct? I mean, mama bear's teaching baby bear to knock over trash cans instead of finding acorns.
Right.
And that's something that every year is being, you know, it's being imprinted on these bears year after year.
Right.
So how do you turn that around? I mean, other than keeping the garbage away, but.
That would be it.
Okay.
I mean, and what you've done, again, what you've done is we have 16 counties that represent 90% of our calls. Only 4 has stepped up and said, garbage is the problem, and we're going to put an ordinance in place. So you guys are saying, yes, that's the problem, and we are addressing it that way. So it's 2 layers, a county layer of saying that's the problem, and a state layer of saying that's the problem. And so, again, and we're not talking about 100% compliance, because that's not reasonable. We're talking about the majority of compliance. So if 60% or more are doing the right thing, it's not worth it for a bear to make a long trip all along that peninsula looking for garbage, because most of the time they're going to strike out. So that is the long-term plan. Again, I think people are going to still see bears, but they're not going to see them with a regularity, and they're not going to see them in a public safety issue. They're going to just see the fleeting, oh, there it goes, it ran. That's the long-term plan.
Well, mine, and I'm sure the rest of these commissioners sitting up here, our biggest concern is the safety of our public. And I, for one, want to see something concrete before a child gets hurt or a person. And you made the comment that this guy's fine, but he's scarred for life. I mean, he's always going to have that scar from that bear, so he can't hardly say he's fine, but, it's a good example of what not to do. But we still need to know, still need to be looking at how do we curtail this? How do we move that population back? Because once they're out in Gulf Breeze or in Naval Live Oaks, they're not heading back to Eglin every night. They've found a new home.
That's, as I showed you on the map, 135 square miles is a pretty long distance, and they don't have any problem moving that distance. So again, if they don't have a reason, they won't be in there with the frequency that would allow it to happen. And I agree with you, and FWC's concern is public safety over anything else. What happened there was multiple things. The bear was in the area with young. She shouldn't feel comfortable in there. Number two, a dog showed up. She shouldn't have felt comfortable staying in her ground. And number three, the man showed up and assaulted the bear. So, I mean, you've got all those things building up. But the fact that the county has said, look, garbage is an issue. We want to control that. We want people to be aware that bears are, number one, that bears live here. Number two, that we don't want garbage exposed. Not just garbage, but people have to, in general, understand that if I put cat food out for the feral cats, I'm drawing in raccoons, possums, rats, and bears. And that general idea is that Santa Rosa County is not going to have all those animals drawn into neighborhoods that creates problems. I mean, again, I'm here to talk about bears. Raccoons hang around neighborhoods, roundworm, rabies. I mean, there's all sorts of things. So I'm asking you guys about garbage for bears, but it's in general, we don't want wildlife congregating in neighborhoods because it creates a lot of other problems.
Okay. And one other thing, you didn't have it on your list, but I found a LED flashlight with a strobe. Boy, they don't like that.
No, they do not like, that's a good point. That's absolutely a good point. Yes, sir.
Well, thank you for coming today. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
I'm hoping our citizens can see this to know that we're not waiting. We're trying to be proactive, not, get ahead of this thing. So,
Yes, sir, and I'll follow up with you on the Blackwater River State Forest.
great. Absolutely. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh,
sorry.
Commissioner Lynchard, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the presentation. Just a couple of observations. It sounds like, and I represent Gulf Breeze. I've seen pictures of bears in Victorian Village. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. It's a subdivision of quarter-acre lots immediately behind Lowe's and Walmart in Tiger Point, right in the middle of a golf course, not in the middle of a wooded area by any stretch.
Right.
It sounds from your presentation like the density of the population, the human population, is not really a factor in the consideration whether or not you relocate a bear. Is that correct?
Correct.
So if it was downtown Miami, you're not going to relocate a bear unless it's a problem bear or...
Well, that's, again, so the density of population here and downtown Miami, there's bear range and there's not bear range. And again, I think what we keep circling back to is Santa Rosa County may like it if they're not bear range, but bears are here, and so the idea is there's no bears in Miami, and there aren't going to be bears in Miami. So what we would like to do is figure out where it's not hospitable, they don't like it here, they don't get any benefit from being around here, and therefore they're not going to be here. Now, will they come in and eat acorns? Sure, but that bear is scared of people. That bear is not going to be the one that's going to be a public safety threat. It's the bears that are dependent on garbage that are a public safety threat, and that's what we're trying to fix.
And the other thing, the FWC Bearwise Grant Program, you've given out $2.1 million?
Yes, sir.
And refitted 13,000 cans?
Yes, sir.
Correct. We have 25,000 garbage cans in the south end of the county alone. So you can see that the math there is weighs against us going in and retrofitting all those cans.
But
it would cost $5 million just for the south end of Santa Rosa County.
Well, I mean, and again, so we look at the state. So the state, it's 1.3 million people we estimate need something to change. But I will say this, for some people, putting it in their garage is not an option. Again, when it gets hot, it stinks, I don't want it. So for the folks that don't want to put a gate hasp on their can, don't want to put their garbage in their garage, don't want to put a shed out to put their trash in it, they need something. And so that's what I guess I want to stress here. The funds are to help folks comply, but there are a lot of options to comply. So we're not suggesting that 25,000 people need beer resistant cans. They don't. Some people do not want them. They're like, they're too heavy. I don't want to mess with them. I'd much rather, I mean, some people, you know, freeze their food scraps. I don't do that, but if there's ways around it. There's a bunch of different options. The funding is only for folks that are like, look, I have an ordinance. I don't know how to comply. Help me out. So we are not suggesting that we'll ever be able to provide enough funding to cover every single person who lives in bear country, but it is enough to say, hey, here's 5 options, and one of those options is we might be able to provide some assistance.
Bear country is an interesting term. There's a bear running around in the city of Gulf Breeze. I'm sure you're aware of that.
I am familiar with that.
I wouldn't consider the city of Gulf Breeze bear country.
Right.
But that's me.
I understand.
Well, thank you very much for your
Thank you.
very brave to come out today.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. All right, with the board's indulgence, I am going to move to item number 11. We have the sheriff and some folks here today, and item number 11 on admin is the municipal service taxing unit for law enforcement in Santa Rosa County. And I'm sure the sheriff and his staff have probably better things to do than sit here through 11 items. So with the board's indulgence, we'll take item number 11. This is a discussion of approval to advertise a public hearing for an enabling ordinance to create a municipal service taxing unit for the purpose of funding law enforcement operations in Santa Rosa County. Sheriff, who want to speak?
Well, thank you and good morning. Yeah, the MSTU, as we talked about last budget season, it came up obviously because of the increase in my budget. And I just want to make sure everybody understands, because I got approached by a couple of people saying, well, it's just another tax. And I had to make them aware that, no, it's not going to be just another tax, that y'all are going to roll back the millage to compensate for the MSTU, if I understand that correctly, right, Dan? Okay. Which, you know, for me, my budget is my budget, and what I need, everything I ask for, I pretty much have to have, and I understand that that's a problem for y'all to provide for me and everything else that you have to deal with. So, you know, I put forth my budget. How you guys want to pay for it is totally up to you, but, you know, I'll back you 100% on anything that will help us, because as you said earlier, you know, the number one purpose for government is the protection of its citizens. So,
All right. Comments or questions from board members? I think this is something that perhaps is long overdue, and I'm glad we can kind of get our arms around this and move it forward. So,
I agree.
Just a comment, Sheriff, I agree with you completely, and that's my understanding, and our jumping off point, I think, in the calculation of the MSTU would be, you know, zero-based. If we took this year's budget and applied an MSTU to fund law enforcement, what would the resulting millage rate be for the county?
Right.
You know, excluding law enforcement. So
right. And
we would have that zero number based on
Sure.
this year. Now, it's going to look different,
Right.
but the bottom line number is going to be the same.
Right. And I think, what percentage of ad valorem do I get right now?
83%.
Okay, so 83% of the taxes already come to me anyway. So, yeah, I think as long as the public understands that, hey, it's just we're calling it a different animal, it's not, you know, something extra that you're going to be paying on your taxes, I think that's the best way to do it.
anything else?
Yes, sir. Just from a process perspective, this is to advertise for the public hearing to create the enabling ordinance. We will do that in December. December 13th will be the date of the public hearing for that enabling ordinance. And then as we go through the budget process, we'll develop the millage rates, a millage rate for the BOCC and a millage rate for the MSTU to fund the sheriff's operations. I think there'll be some back and forth. There are things that the sheriff takes in from a revenue perspective, like charges for prisoners, that would help offset that.
Right.
So I think this is just the starting point. It puts the ordinance in place that allows us to create this transparent and visible sign of the commitment to public safety that this board has.
And speaking of transparency, I think it, just like the school board,
Right.
as a citizen, I know how much my tax dollars go to school board. I'll now know specifically how much goes to sheriff's department and how much stays with the county commission, so
Right.
I think it's a good thing.
And as a taxpayer, I like knowing that. I like knowing where every one of my tax dollars goes, so, you know, I think it makes sense.
Commissioner Sullivan?
Commissioner Williamson, I think, is first.
Commissioner Williamson?
I just think it's got to be careful as we move forward that there's a lot of fiscal uncertainties that are out there with the state and other things that could make it almost impossible to do a straight line calculation, you know, of what you had this year as far as millage rate goes and as well as the sheriff's budget as well. I understand where Commissioner Lynchard is coming from, but I don't want folks to think that that's a foregone conclusion. That's the jumping off point, as you say, but as the budget gets worked and we see what the impact would be from the vote of the amendments that are on the ballot in November, there might require some tweaking. And then lastly, I would say I think this is a great opportunity, if this moves forward, to look at a fluctuating millage rate instead of having a millage rate that is constant every single year. You know, it may go down, it may go up within reason as budgetary factors and resource allocation changes. So that first year, when you extract out public safety, the millage rate may be lower than it would have been at the 6.0953, or it may be slightly higher, but with the understanding that moving forward, it's going to have that little fluctuation. That may be something the board wants to consider.
Commissioner Sullivan?
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to make sure the public understands that the question would be, well, how about the local option sales tax? I thought that was going to take care of law enforcement. Well, with what we're trying to do now with moving your piece of the millage, capital projects will still come out of the local option sales tax. Is that right, Dan?
Yes, sir. The sheriff and I have talked. I mean, I think the capital requirements that the sheriff's identified in his long-term plan and his strategic vision, jail expansion, additional cars, and keeping those cars replenished and safe in the future with the expansion of school resource officers and additional deputies on the road, that's beyond what could be addressed in this MSTU. It would be addressed with the local option sales tax.
And one thing Commissioner Williamson said, and I appreciate his comments, but I want to clarify, when you said public safety, we would still, as a board, be responsible for the public safety office as far as emergency services and dispatch, items like this. This is just an MSTU for what you currently have under your umbrella.
Right, sheriff's office only.
All right, anything else? All right, then I'm going to move this without objection to the consent agenda for Thursday. Hearing none, it passes.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time. All right, let's go back to item number 1 is the LETF application for the big gala. This is a discussion of approval of a request from the Sheriff's Office to use the Law Enforcement Trust Fund in the amount of $5,000 in support of the community-based mentoring through the big gala at the request of Big Brothers and Big Sisters of Northwest Florida. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, I'll move it to consent agenda on Thursday. Without objection, so passed. Item 2 is BlueMedicare agreement with Florida Blue. Discussion of the BlueMedicare renewal agreement. Devan, did you have anything, or Dan, did you?
Devan's here to answer any questions. This is just a renewal. I think we put this on the agenda for your awareness. There is a slight reduction in the costs here for the agreement, so we just wanted you to be aware.
Okay. That's always a good thing. And outstanding coverage, Devan. Thank you for all your work on that. Appreciate it. All right. No comments or questions. I'll move it without objection to the consent agenda. So moved. Item 3 is a resolution, area of operation. This is a discussion of approval of a resolution granting continued area of operation authority to the Escambia County Finance Authority, Housing Finance Authority, for the purpose of operating the authority's single-family mortgage loan bond program with Santa Rosa County.
the 2018 Area of Operation Resolution. This has pretty much been standard practice for quite a few years because of the size of Santa Rosa County. I think we're probably on the verge of one day taking this on ourselves, but for this year, I'd like to move this, seeing no comments or questions light up, I'd like to move this to the consent agenda without objection. Seeing none, so moved. Item 4 is surplus property, declaration of surplus property items from Santa Rosa County Computer and GIS Department, as recommended by the Clerk of Courts. Any comments, questions? Seeing none, I'll move that to consent agenda without objection. So moved. Item 5, Midway Fire District Certificate of Need, annual issuance of permit to provide advanced life support, non-transport emergency response services to Midway Volunteer Fire Department. Again, this is pretty much boilerplate. Any comments, questions? Seeing none, we'll move to consent agenda on Thursday without objection. So moved. Item 6 is event request for the approval of the 3rd annual Mary Street Fortune Fun Run event request. Dan, has all the paperwork and insurance in place?
Yes, sir.
All right. Moved without objection. Seeing no comments or questions, so moved to the consent agenda without objection. Item 7 is HMGP for Chipper Lane and Maranatha Way Drainage Project Modification Number 2. This is number 2 to a sub-grant agreement, 18 HM-HM-4-01-67-01-323 for the HMGP at Chipper Lane and Maranatha Way Drainage Project, which provides a scope of work modification and increase to the grant award in the amount of $1,043. Any questions or comments on that project? Seeing none, I'll move that to consent agenda without objection. So moved. Item 8, Coastal Partnership Initiative Grant Opportunity Recommendation for fiscal year 2019 and 2020. This is a discussion of staff's recommendation to submit a grant application for the improvements to Archie Glover Boat Ramp through the fiscal year 2020 Coastal Partnership Initiative Opportunity and authorizing matching funds. Any comments or questions on that? Seeing none, I'll move that to the consent agenda on Thursday without objection. So moved. Item 9 is the Kennedy Property Purchase Continue Contribution Agreement and Restrictive Easements. Is there any comments or questions on that item? We've discussed that before. Commissioner Jerry Cooey, please.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Am I correct to say that this is a property at 3304 Joppa Drive? Is that what
I think it is.
Okay. I see that we're paying 300 and what for it?
We're paying the appraised value, which is, I think, $390,000 for the house and 5 acres, or 9 acres.
For the house and 9 acres. And currently, the property appraiser has it listed at $230,000. About a 25% difference there in appraisal. I understand that typically Mr. Brown is about 15% below market value, but come on, guys, $230,000 to $360,000. You don't see an issue with that?
Jerry, right now with property values escalating, we could get it reappraised. I would think that Mr. Brown would probably reassess that property this year and find it closer, you know.
Well, that's his number for 2018. I just bought property up Pine Blossom for $7,000 an acre. This is almost $40,000 an acre.
You got awful lucky then. With the house.
With the house.
Commissioner Parker?
I've done good. I hadn't spoken on anything today. I probably should continue to be quiet, but I'll just tell you my knowledge of this real quick, Jerry. And honestly, I have to say I feel like this is a God opportunity for this county. Full transparency, how this started was last year. I remember I get to see Commissioner Salter almost every Saturday out there at the soccer park, and literally thousands of parents, and it's very exciting to see us moving forward with now getting the Griswold property to be able to bring, the football complex from the old landfill site up there, and I know the folks are looking forward to it. Well, I was driving by one day, and this is so that the purity of how this happened. I stopped and I talked with Mr. Kennedy. I saw him and his wife, and they had their kids out there, and they were raking pine straw. And there is a house there, and this is if you look at a rectangle of the property that we're buying, the 50 acres, this would be a piece out of that on like the corner of the rectangle that would separate the county new football complex from the soccer complex. And so it seems, pretty integral and a smooth transition to be able to have these properties, that it would be, contiguous and offer some opportunities. And I asked him that day, I said, sir, I never spoke to the commission about it, but I know they've been working on this other purchase, and I asked him if he would consider this. And it was a few weeks later, he said, me and my wife had already been talking about moving, and what will we need to do? Well, that's the part where I think Roy was getting ready to chime in of, this was able, so to use these dollars that are set aside for this base protection, which I know Commissioner Salter and the rest of the board have advocated for so stringently over well over a decade, we had to use these funds. We had to use the appraiser that was approved by the Navy, and this actually would have happened several months ago, but there was some delay, and we had another appraisal done, I believe, and then Roy may correct me here along the storyline. It looks like he's going to, but we were dealing with the Navy out of Jacksonville, and so the short of it is thankfully this is coming from those funds that the Navy provides for their protection, and had the opportunity to meet with Navy personnel about it. So is this a little more than it may have sold on the free market? Quite possibly is. But I think the big scheme here is really, and why I say I think it's a God opportunity, is they didn't have to sell it. There was quite a bit of paperwork I saw presented to them that was clearly, making sure that they were under no duress or forced of eminent no mean to sell it. But it provides opportunity that will now be able to be used more by the youth, which, we obviously are growing, and so we're going to have to provide more for our youth. But also, I think it provides a great opportunity for the county as a whole, as far as, I will share with you, I've learned a lot over the 2 years of how important protecting Whiting's mission is. And this is very important to Whiting, that now they're going to have a restrictive easement that clearly lays out exactly when we can use the property and what we're using it for and those sort of things. And that is such as an integral part of our economy. But I just share with you that is how this evolved. And so I understand the concern, and I'm very fortunate that and thankful for the Navy funds being able to do it. But I wanted to share that with you. That's the complete story in a nutshell, how it evolved.
We have actually had 2 different appraisals, MAI appraisals of the property done, of the property and the adjacent property done. And those appraisals have been subject to review by the Navy, who obviously funds the majority of this. So, and actually, we've been trying to purchase the adjacent property since 2009, and have had appraisals throughout that time, 3 of them. There's been a significant, very significant increase from that original appraisal to this appraisal, which reflects the ongoing development in the Pace area. So I'm very comfortable with the appraised value, and with the fact that the Navy is paying through various mechanisms 100% of this. None of this is general revenue funds from the county.
And Jerry, I know it's all our tax dollars. Navy, whatever it comes from, it comes out of mine in your pocket and goes to either the state or the county or the Fed. So I agree with you there. And I was taken back a little on the price of the property until I, got some more of this information. It's pretty high dollar. The only benefit I can see to this purchase of both pieces, we've had a lot of complaints lately from the citizens about the rapid growth and overpopulation and Woodbine Road. This will take that many acres off of being able to be a housing development now. So
Let me say I'm not against recreation, and I'm certainly not against the protection of Whiting Field. But over and over and over, each time I come up here, there's awful high dollars being paid for things. I don't believe for a minute that that piece of property on the open market will sell for $360,000. Not going to happen. All right? As stewards of our tax dollars, whether it be federal tax dollars or whether it be county tax dollars, every single time that we do this, it's 30 and 40% above what has been reasonable in the last year, year and a half. I think Greg Brown is an awful good property appraiser. For him to have it at $230,000 in 2018, with the house included, for us to offer $360,000 for it, I think is out of line. I think it's out of line by anybody's. I don't want to stomp on toes again, but $850,000 and we paid $3.4 million for the Pullen property. That's another one. Every one of these always seems to be 30 and 40% above what is reasonable. What I and other folks think. Certainly, I don't think you can disagree with Greg Brown. The citizens of Santa Rosa County don't disagree with Greg Brown because they keep reelecting him. 230 to 360, not buying it.
Mr. Chairman. Yes, sir. We have a county attorney over here who's worked on these projects for numerous months. He says he's comfortable with it. The Navy says he's comfortable with it. Jerry, I don't want to upset you, but you've never agreed with anything we've tried to do, so thank you.
Well, I certainly don't agree with the Pullen property, if that's what you're mad about this morning. Nobody agrees with the price that was paid for that. But this is 240 to 360, a sizable difference. Thank you.
All right. Any other comments or questions on item number 9? If not, I'll move it without objection to consent agenda on Thursday. Item 10, interlocal agreement for Pensacola and Perdido Bay Estuary Program. This is a discussion of approval of the resolution and interlocal agreement for the Pensacola and Perdido Bays Estuary Program. I want to go on record to say that right at the get-go, I wasn't real happy with the name of it. It's Pensacola and Perdido Bays, but I would like to assure the citizens of Santa Rosa County this estuary program also includes Blackwater and East Bays, because if it didn't, I wouldn't have no part of it. Also, I've sat for quite a few years as the chairman of the Bay Area Resource Council. Currently, Grover Robinson is chair of that. The Bay Area Resource Council is rolling into this estuary program, and it will have a new title, new name. And I've already requested to be placed back in the chairmanship of that program so I can monitor these funds and make sure that Santa Rosa County gets an even deal on this. Even lobbied to change the name and add Blackwater Bay to that, but it would have convoluted the issue with the feds, and I was convinced that we didn't need to do that right now because basically it'd be backing up the program. So, but that's all on record now, and I'll open the floor to any other commissioners who have comments on this. Commissioner.
Mr. Chair, were you selected as chairman, or would you like this board to provide a resolution in support of your request?
I have not been selected, and I would certainly be happy to accept the nomination.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, and this board can speak with one voice in saying that we recommend and support you as chairman, especially given your long standing on that board.
All right. Can we put something like that on Thursday's agenda, or how would we need to do that? A suggestion.
Direct staff to add that to Thursday?
Yeah, we can add a resolution to this action item. Would recommend leaving on the regular agenda then.
Okay. All right. And any other comments, questions? Commissioner Parker.
I was just going to comment. Commissioner Cole put it lightly. He did. I'm going to say even feverishly fought for the name change to be more palatable for folks in Santa Rosa County at those meetings. I have the opportunity to serve with Commissioner Cole on the Bay Area Resource Council. I think I owe that pleasure to Commissioner Williamson that placed me on there when I was a newly elected commissioner. It's been a terrific learning experience. I think we'd be remiss too not to also say thank you so much to Erica. She's here today. She is faithfully at every BARC meeting, and her level of understanding is such a high level on these. And so I would gladly support that for the recommendation Commissioner Williamson's brought forward as well.
All right, then we'll leave item number 10 on the regular agenda for Thursday. Thank you for your confidence. Item number 11, we've already put away. Item number 12 is a program management owner's agent for the courthouse project. Dan, take this, please.
Yes, sir. As we are awaiting the design bid proposals, those will be received by the county on November 8th. We've been discussing and looking at how we manage and oversee this very significant and very important construction project for the county. There are several key elements that we don't have the resident capacity on staff: architectural experience, threshold inspections, and the recommendation is to outsource and hire a firm that would be our agent, our owner's agent and representative in the process as we go through the final design plans, the programming and final design and review of construction plans, review of architectural elements that we don't have the capacity to do on staff. So the staff's recommendation, the best way to do this is to outsource, to hire a firm to do this. The industry standard cost is about 3 to 5% of the construction project cost. And we have to do this through an RFQ to be in compliance with CCNA because of the size of the project.
Dan, I understand from our conversation previously that anybody that's currently involved in the current RFQ for construction, architectural, we're looking for somebody outside of that box.
Yes, sir. The firms that would bid on this would not, they wouldn't be on a team that's part of a design build team for the actual courthouse project. It would have to be separate from that.
Okay. And thanks for all the work you've done on this so far. You and staff have done an outstanding job getting it on the street to this point, so thank you. Yes, sir.
While we're on the topic of the courthouse, could you give me the legalese of not having the courthouse in the city as what appears the state statutes lay out must be in the county seat?
Well, apparently, the state statutes that I read are different than yours.
Okay.
The commissioners by vote can expand the county seat, quote unquote, 15 miles, so it can be located where the property is located.
What about the part that says that the county seat would have to be in place, an expansion of the county seat would have to be in place a minimum of 7 years prior to that being approved?
I don't think that's correct.
Okay. So you believe that legally Santa Rosa County can move the courthouse outside of the current county seat?
I do.
And what methods are you going to do? Are you going to increase the county seat? Is that the plan?
Yes, essentially, for the location of the courthouse.
So you're going to have part of the county seat way outside of the county seat on that 15-acre piece of property?
We're going to have the courthouse on that 15-acre piece of property.
All right, thank you.
On the RFQ, RFP. Seeing none, we'll move that to the consent agenda on Thursday without objection. So moved. Item 13, City of Milton funding request.
Chair, just as a point of clarification, something occurred to me. If we're going to expand, that would not have, I don't want anybody to be thinking that we're going to be annexing in or we're going to be expanding the City of Milton's defined geographical boundary to make this happen. So do you want to just speak to that real quick to reassure folks that that's not the case?
It will not be an annexation. The city of Milton corporate boundaries, municipal boundaries will remain the same.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. All right, good clarification. Item 13, again, is discussion of using District 2 recreation funds in total of $150,000 to assist in the City of Milton's plan for renovations at Carpenter's Park, specifically for the splash pad amenity. We have with us today the city manager of the great city of Milton, and this is something the mayor and I have worked on for several years and discussed, and he had to do some arm twisting because I'm not a big splash pad person, but I felt like he made a convincing argument, and with Mr. Jorgensen backing him up, that's kind of a hard team to match. And it reflects on times in the past where, like on Park Avenue, we've teamed, District 2's teamed with the City of Milton, and also on Russell Harbor Landing. So you have the podium.
We have a number of joint projects that we've worked on in the past and are working on currently, Mr. Chairman. My name's Randy Jorgensen, 6738 Dixon Street, City Hall, City of Milton. With me today is Councilman Jeff Snow. He's in the audience. You can get him to approach if you ask, I'm sure. I do, before I go into comments about Carpenter's Park, want to recognize the passing of a person that was a matriarch within this community. Brother Joe Bamberg's wife, Betty, at the age of 98, passed yesterday, and the Bamberg family has been influential within the Milton community for decades. So I want to recognize her and the Bambergs and their impact on the city of Milton before I get into this presentation. Carpenter's Park. All of you are aware of the location of Carpenter's Park, Broad Street, Munson Highway, southeast corner. Significant park in the community's history, sits on the Blackwater River, just adjacent to our marina. Now, at my age, I can't read that slide, but I'm sure all of you can. And one of the principal elements of the work that's proposed to be done in Carpenter's Park is an interactive water feature. At least that's the way that TSW, the firm we've engaged to put together a conceptual master plan on the park, has described it. We all commonly refer to them as splash pads. The splash pad in Carpenter's Park, and I believe this is detailing some of the aspects of what the development of a splash pad will require, requires that a bathroom be located within 200 linear feet of the splash pad itself, that the proposed splash pad in Carpenter's Park will be at or about 3,600 square feet in area, that at least in the preliminary designs, the water would be recirculated, and the bathrooms will have the required amenities to meet the code. Next slide. This is, I think, the floor plan, the layout of those restrooms that may be constructed in close proximity. We also have an existing facility that we may choose to renovate. The improvements at Carpenter's Park vary as it relates to the overall cost from $3 to $7 million, depending upon which version the council ultimately embraces. Park improvements with those types of dollar values are significant for a community of 10,000 to take on. And we appreciate the interest of Commissioner Cole in extending his rec funds for this purpose to the level that he has at $150,000. I know that the other commissioners probably want a race to match those proceeds, and we'll welcome that race if you want to hold it. Next slide. This is the interactive water feature itself. This is a proposed themed water feature. You can see by the design that's found there, it recognizes the importance of naval aviation in the community and the area's history. Ultimately, I don't know that this will be the exact design that we'll decide on, but that's where we're at in this process currently. This master plan has been completed. Now we have put out a notice to proceed to affirm to now do the specific work required for design of the interactive water feature, the engineering, geotechnical, survey, and utility improvements necessary to serve that facility. It will be the first element of the park improvement that we'll undertake. Next slide. You can see here the naval aviation theme. I do have some concerns that the fighters will disappear in a relatively short period of time, if in fact that's what we place there. Next slide. Next steps, you can see where we're at as it relates to construction of the interactive water feature, the splash pad itself. That's a fairly aggressive timeline, especially in light of the recent occurrence just to our east. Construction trades industry was already going great guns. The demand on their time to help rebuild the area that now needs their assistance is even going to put a greater burden on that industry. I hope we can achieve our objective as described here, but I think it will be a challenge, not only as it relates to this project, but all others within the Panhandle of Florida. That's where we're at. I appreciate Commissioner Cole extending his rec funds for this purpose. Again, anybody else want to contribute, we're happy to take the money, and we need all the help we can get. Questions you would have of me?
Randy, not really a question, but I appreciate Councilman Snow, yourself, and the mayor kind of staying on me about this and twisting my arm a little bit. I like the fact, one of my concerns was, of course, the upkeep and the cost long-term. And when you guys came up with the idea of using fresh water, not having to recycle, keeping all the chlorine and that cost down, can you go a little bit into that?
Well, O&M on a splash pad is about like operating a swimming pool for a community. It's a line item that's not insignificant in an annual operating budget. When you don't recirculate the water, the costs are considerably less, the cost for construction and the cost for O&M. We're the potable water provider. We have the ability to provide that water for our use at a cost that would be reasonable from most people's perspectives. So that's our intent. We'll cut out hundreds of thousands of dollars in O&M and in construction.
Okay. And then the water will be reused after that point?
No, our water will actually be ultimately discharged. We're not going to recirculate what's found there. It will become part of the natural, it will be discharged to our system, and it will go to our plant and be treated.
Okay. All right. Comments, questions? All right. Randy,
Thank you.
Thanks for coming today. Appreciate it. If there's no other comments or questions, I'd like to move this to the consent agenda on Thursday. Seeing none, so passed. Item 14. Donnie?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to give you our report on our excess funds that we're going to refund back to the county this year. Our funds that we'll be able to refund back to the county will be $576,727 is what our excess funds will be. A lot of that comes from our recording, and we have some from also our finance department. But that's our budget refund for this year.
Okay, so noted. I see Miss Jane over there quickly making a note and signing it in your blood. So, all right, we'll go on now to the economic. No action was needed on that. That was information item. So we'll go on item number 1 under economic development. This is a local event marketing grant request. Redneck Christmas Parade. Discussion of approval of Southern Motorsports Milton LLC event for the Redneck Christmas Parade on December 8th, 2018, and funding the amount of $5,000 for advertising. The parade got too big for Schmuckla, I guess. And too rowdy, maybe. So now it's over in East Milton. I got to deal with all the rowdiness. So, comments or questions? At least there's somebody responsible for it now. I think before it was just come and have fun, but I think there's responsible party for it now. So this all falls under Julie Morgan's purview. So Julie, you got any comments on this, or we just need to move it without objection?
It was recommended by the TDC at the meeting at the beginning of the month.
Good. All right. Seeing no comments or questions, and we'll move it to Thursday's consent agenda without objection. Item 2 is a special event application, 33rd Annual Navarre Crew of Jesters Mardi Gras Parade. This is a request for the 33rd Annual Parade on Gulf Boulevard of Navarre Beach on February 23rd, 2019, from 1 to 5 p.m. Pretty much boilerplate, as long as they got all their paperwork in place, and I'll move that to the consent agenda on Thursday without objection. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Pam Wingate. I'm the president of the Summer Wind Resort, The Inn. I've got one request when you do these special events on Navarre Beach, and I'm not sure if you've incorporated it yet, but when they do this, the traffic's such a nightmare out there, coming on and coming off. If you'd incorporate a traffic control fee into these event pages and make them pay to have somebody out there at 98 and Causeway and at the four-way stop at the Causeway, that would help alleviate a lot of these 3-hour backups that are out there. I mean, the events are fine, but just they need to have traffic control put into the applications, make them pay for it up front. That way we know that we've got it covered. And that's just a simple request, and I've noticed it for 17 years now out there.
Well, I think it's a very good suggestion. I don't know if we'd have, time to get an estimate from the sheriff and get it on this particular application.
Yeah, I mean, even if you roll it into the first of the year and try to start doing every event application, automatically they're going to pay for traffic control. Just let them know up front they got to take care of it.
Right.
And I think you will have less complaints on these events if you'll incorporate that into them.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Dan would make a note on that, maybe bring it back to the
We'll look at the
board.
special event application and how to incorporate that.
Okay, all right. I see a bunch of shaking heads up and down, so I think county administrator will handle that for us. All right, all right, before we go into the engineer's report, let me move that, did I move that without objection to Thursday's consent agenda? So moved. We'll take let's take a 10-minute break, be back here at 25 till, please. All right, welcome back. At this time, we will go into the engineer's report. Mr. Blaylock, keep it short and sweet.
I was right there with you to short and sweet.
There you go.
Unfortunately, we have two items that may take a bit of time to get through. The first one being the Spencerfield Traffic Study Recommended Improvements and Implementation. As you know, the board commissioned a traffic study with Genesis. They made their full report to the board a number of weeks ago, directed engineering staff to come back with specific recommendations. We have those specific recommendations enumerated in items 1 through 7, with 6 and 7 no action in this first phase. We can pull up the screens and move forward one slide, please. The first one being the intersection of East Spencerfield. If you will go scroll over to East Spencerfield, South Spencer, and Carlin, because these slides are not in the order of my presentation, please. Move forward, advance. One more. One more. There we go. The East Spencerfield, South Spencerfield, Carlin, we're recommending a new signal with new left turn lanes, the addition of pavement markings, and traffic calming. This particular recommendation is $390,000. And while these are not necessarily in a priority order, they are. That absent this one, we can't move forward with the the East Spencerfield Hamilton Bridge, so they are interrelated, this being a priority over those two selection. Number 2 was West Spencerfield, Berry Hill, King George. We'll need to back up on that slide, please. There we go. On that particular one, we're talking about adding a right turn lane, right turn lanes, and adjusting that signal timing, adding a dedicated right turn lane coming out of King George Parkway headed south is the addition that we put in. That proposed modifications are $175,000. Number 3 is the aforementioned East Spencerfield and Hamilton Bridge Road. One more. Thank you. East Spencerfield and Hamilton Bridge, we did pavement markings. We're recommending removing, as you can see, the 3-way stop conditions and also adding the sidewalk connection. This is relatively inexpensive of the 5 recommended actions at $10,000. One of the things that we can do and look at is whether, after we do Carlin, doing the any required traffic calming north and south. Item number 4 is the West Spencerfield, North Spencerfield Attaway. Our recommendation is the pavement marking, the signal timing, and new signal heads at $75,000. Item number 5, West Spencerfield, North Spencerfield, Phase A. This is right there at the Benny Russell Park. We are recommending the traffic calming and pavement markings, removing the 4-way stop condition at $30,000. We further recommend to look at constructing a roundabout once the park construction begins as a Phase B. And then item number 6 and 7, as I mentioned before, we're recommending no action in this first phase. These improvements recommended total an estimated $680,000, and we just need the board to give us direction on which alternatives or questions at this time.
I think funding should come from the incoming chair's non-discretionary funding.
I think you have a second.
Oh, yeah, I do. Don lit his up. So.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Sullivan.
When we first started talking about the traffic calming around all the Spencerfield roads, I had several concerns, but I'm very pleased with what I'm hearing today, especially Berry Hill Road and Hammersmith. Roger, has the HOA agreed to work with us on that right turn lane coming out of Hammersmith?
We have had discussions with the HOA. They have not agreed at this time, and certainly with board direction to pursue that alternative, we'll sit down with them and work out those details and come back and report to the board.
I really like that part of the study, so it's going to be a great relief for Hammersmith. Thank you.
All right. Anybody else? Commissioner Parker?
I just wanted to say, too, I appreciate the work Genesis did and Roger and his staff, and especially Dan. You know, I know we've spent a lot of time talking about this, and I mean that from the bottom of my heart. I mean, when we think about the traffic study that was shown, and especially when I had a chance to talk with Mark about that, and this is sort of another one of those things where we say, you know, we are one county, and it's so interdependent because we've got citizens from several districts driving through there, and that we're able to accomplish traffic improvements for the neat way. I think that probably the most interesting perspective Dan provided, and I just think it's worth speaking on, is, you know, the $680,000 is absolutely a lot of money, but when we put in perspective of a major traffic improvement and the thought of nearly $30 million to do something to Woodbine Road or some of these other things for infrastructure, this is, I think, an extremely cheap project to be extremely effective. That'll help, you know, literally tens of thousands of folks every day. So I appreciate all the hard work staff has put in, and I don't know if after comments, if Dan wanted to present some of the things we talked about, or if not, I'll be the one as far as the possible funding thing.
I think I included in the memo, options for funding is local options sales tax, district paving dollars. Each of the districts in the next 2 years has funding available and programmed in the local option sales tax. That totals $425,000 per district. So if any of the district commissioners would be interested in offering some of that money towards this project, would be the first option. The second option would be road and bridge reserves. The balance of that fund can support, the fund balance in road and bridge can support a portion of this, not full funding for this project. And the other option, and my last option, would be unassigned fund balance that is available. So those are the funding options, I think, to be considered.
I have one question, and then I'll state one of the recommendations that me and Dan had talked with. The only question on this, or maybe for Roger or Mark, since I've got two super smart guys here, is could you help remind me, as well as the board and the public, on the East Spencer and South Spencer field when we went that route instead of a roundabout at that intersection? Because I know from construction costs it looks very similar.
No, I believe the roundabout was 300,000 plus.
Right.
For a roundabout, and then there was the right-of-way issues to contend with. They did not include the acquisition costs. All of these improvements we're recommending right now can be done within the existing right-of-way.
Okay, and that was pretty much how I remembered it. I just wanted to make sure on that. If nobody else has anything on it, my thought was, just as plain, it's no secret, I was going to ask North Pace if they wanted to kick in 125 from the lost district road paving program funds, and then if South Pace kicked in 125, and then 430 from road and bridge, that would total out to 680, unless somebody can think of a better combination. That was sort of what I'm floating out there.
Mr. Chairman, I had a conversation with Dan, and I agree with Sam. I think it'd be appropriate to take some of our lost road funds and help offset that cost, so, on the north side of Berry Hill Road.
Mr. Chair, I have a
Thank you.
question.
Commissioner Williams.
No, this isn't in the district, but I just want to say it's a great project, and I think seeing you guys work together well on this, it's going to be a great improvement. I am curious about, of the 680 total cost, do we know how much of that is going to be next year's fiscal impact, and then how much might be beyond?
Timing-wise, we haven't laid it out. I would say we would plan for the majority this fiscal year. Obviously, design of those larger improvements, the turn lane, stoplight, and the Berry Hill, West Spencer Field improvements are going to take a little bit longer. Some of the other things speed calming measures and removal of stop signs is something simpler that we could do even with in-house forces.
So the 125 that's committed from each respective district, that could be this fiscal year, and then if they wanted to, the following year, when it kind of gets re-upped, they'd be able to do the same thing again if it was phased, correct?
Yes, sir.
So do we know what the delta is between doing roundabouts versus not doing roundabouts? How much additional cost there would be? And if you're splitting up in fiscal impact, the reason I'm asking about this is I support the project, but we had some citizens that said, their preference would be to maybe invest additional dollars to do the roundabout option. And we know that the consultant and staff have done a great job of providing different options where, hey, this would be the best, and then we have another option, you kind of pick the pricing that you're comfortable with. But if the district commissioners were in support of doing the roundabout options, since you're looking at doing work in this fiscal year and you'd have that impact, and that's really the only decision we have in front of us is what's the fiscal impact going to be of this project this year? And then, you're looking at when Benny Russell Park improvements begin, then you'd have the fiscal impact associated with the roundabout and improvements in that next fiscal year. I would support if you wanted to do the roundabout option, since citizens and consultants seem to think that was a better way to go, more long-term. I know it's more of an initial investment, but if that's something that either one of y'all were looking to consider, I would support you in that.
I think, Commissioner, to put the roundabouts in at all of the intersections where they were provided as options was about $1.2 million estimated cost from the study. What that does not include is right-of-way acquisition, as Roger mentioned, and that's sort of an undetermined at this point in time. That could be another couple $100,000, or it could be another $500,000, depending on where we're talking about and how much, and appraisals and things like that. So we didn't put that into this recommendation, but that's something we could go back and look at, costing out a little bit in a little bit more detail.
Well, here again, I'm sure it's not something that y'all haven't already considered since it's your districts, but we did have folks from HOAs come and speak to us. I believe one gentleman was in a leadership position at one of the HOAs. Maybe those HOAs, if they own the property where the right-of-way would be, maybe if they prefer the roundabout option, maybe they would be willing to donate the property that would be required to create the roundabouts to keep the cost more attainable as you spread it out over the course of the next couple of years. And then it kind of brings them in as an active partner. Hey, if you'd rather have the roundabout, we're going to need the right-of-way. Would you be willing to contribute all or a portion of that cost? Either they will or they won't. But if they have strong buy-in and their HOA members do, might be able to get it done.
Mr. Chairman, I think the HOA that we heard from, I could be wrong, that was Hammersmith. I don't know of any other large HOAs along Spencerfield. And here again, I like what I see there at Berry Hill Road in Hammersmith, working with the HOA, trying to get that right turn lane. So I think that was the HOA we heard from, and I like what I see there. But I do agree with Commissioner Williamson. We need to just look at it, but I'd like to see us go ahead and move forward with this piece of the plan and further look at the roundabouts for the future.
I would offer, I think, for the traffic light intersection, Roger, correct me if I'm wrong, if we're going to put turn lanes and the traffic light there at South Spencerfield, East Spencerfield, Carlin, and we're going to do the improvements at Berry Hill. Those design efforts are something we would probably task out to one of our continuing engineering contractors with a scope, and we could include in that an assessment of additional property acquisition or right-of-way acquisition before we go to a final design.
Good enough.
I didn't know if, no, thank you, Dan. I didn't know if I needed to make that recommendation in the form of an action as far as the funding. I'm getting a head shake. So I'll make a recommendation without objection that we allow staff to move forward with the recommendation of items 1 through 7, and that the funding would be allocated $125,000 from each of District 1 and District 3 local option sales tax district road paving, and the remainder $430,000 from road and bridge reserves, and I would make that without objection.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner.
just for clarification, that will be the following budget year, not what we've already approved for the coming year on our roads. I saw Stephen with a look on his face.
Yes, so we would pull that future year program money forward as our local option sales tax revenue allows, which I think I'll look at Jane quick, but I think we have the money, the local option sales tax, to pull that money forward. It won't impact what you'll see coming up on Stephen's agenda is road paving suggestions for some of the districts, which includes this year's local option sales tax paving.
I'll look on his face.
All right, so moved. Item 2.
Item 2 is a discussion of the extension of a contract between Florida Department of Corrections and Santa Rosa County Board of Commissioners, and authorize the chairman to sign all related documents. We currently have an inmate crew working in the landfill and all our other closed landfills, and this will extend that contract a period of 3 years. We recommend inclusion on the consent agenda.
Comments or questions? Move that to the consent agenda without objection, so moved. Item 3.
Item number 3 is a discussion of a task order in the amount of $102,235 to HDR Engineering to provide the engineering, design, the permitting, and the bid support for a Phase 1, Sequence 2 landfill gas and collection system expansion at the county's central landfill. As the board knows, the central landfill has a landfill gas collection. We've gone into phases 1, 2, 3, and phases 4, A and B. We have a designated time when we occupied cell C that we had to put this gas extrusion system in. What this will do is design and permit and provide construction plans for us to meet those deadlines. So we recommend approval of the task order. Be placed on
Comments
the
or
consent
questions
agenda.
from members of the board? Roger, how close are we to getting away from flaring and into use of the...
Just a recommendation and a policy decision by this board and a couple of $1 million.
What if
We've actually got it programmed in out years to look at it. Each year as we go through the budgetary process, we look at the capital improvement projects, those that we can do and fund easily, and this one has, it's there, it's in our 5-year capital improvement plan. Just the number, I don't recall off the top of the year what year it's currently sitting, but that is flexible, it moves up and down. The biggest thing that looking with the landfill gas is the beneficial reuse, is what we are looking at, because we would look at an alternative that has some payback period shorter than 40 years.
All right, thank you. All right, that item is moved without objection, so moved to the consent agenda. Item 4.
Item number 4 is a discussion of the contract modification number 3 to Panhandle Paving and Grading in the amount of $37,740, an additional 40 days for the Pace Lane, Patterson Lane HMGP project. On September 5th of this year, the Tropical Storm Gordon produced some flash flooding along Pace Lane. Our nearly completed project worked very well. However, there was some additional areas that were identified within the study area. We contracted with our consultant Atkins, the engineer of record. They looked at alternatives and some modifications, and one of the things we're looking to do is expand the actual drainage area that can be collected and put into one of our retention ponds, and this change order would do that, and we're recommending approval. Funding will be 70% with the state, it's grant eligible, with a 25% match with the county.
All right, comments or questions? Seeing none, I'll move that to the consent agenda on Thursday, so moved. Item 5.
Item number 5 is a discussion of the Whispering Pines Boulevard drainage area. The Board of County Commissioners received from the citizens in that area a PowerPoint presentation. The board directed staff to look at doing a review, and we did an initial review of the reports, the photographs, and essentially the first rain event that was listed was that large April 2014 event. That event produced 22 to 26 inches in an area within a 24-hour period. We had a 5.3 7 inches falling within 1 hour, both of which exceed what we will call our 100-year design event. This was a very extreme event. We went back through our records to research how many homes had actually flooded. There was only one area that we could identify that was some unclear. We asked for a full report based on the street names that were named in that report. We went through Sheila Fitzgerald, our grants department, Karen Thornhill with our floodplain manager, and essentially we came back with 3 potential flood areas. However, they were reported during the 2000 event, which was another 100-year event. 2 of those homes have been resolved with the Orion Lake HMGP project. That was in the Crete Circle area. We did identify one roadway, Miami Court in Crete Woods subdivision, that does warrant additional research and observation. However, I'm not sure that we can sit here and realistically design something that's going to handle 22 inches of water in a rain event. We also looked at the other areas of the 14 areas, and much of this flooding that we saw was roadway flooding, superficial yard flooding, and considered nuisance flooding, so we don't recommend any additional study in that area at this time. So with that, would open up to any questions the board may have.
All right. Comments or questions? Roger, I'm glad we're taking a look at this. We've had a lot of comments from citizens down there, and Commissioner Williamson.
Thanks. I just want to confirm there's been no structural flooding
Reported, sir. I'm not going to say there were no structural flooding, but we couldn't document any.
Okay, so no documented structural flooding in that area?
And just for clarification, definition is habitable space.
Okay. And then I'm just curious, have we heard from any of the folks from Whispering Pines Boulevard since we got the results of this study? Have they been made aware of the results of this study?
Yes, I notified the gentleman that had sent an email initially requesting this study that this would be discussed today.
What about Carmen Reynolds, Heidi Allgood, the folks that have been...
I have not heard from any of the other residents. I asked Roger to specifically contact Mr. Lewis, I think it was, that sent the email in with the PowerPoint presentation.
Okay. I don't know if we have their email information, but I'd definitely like to make sure that we are providing those individuals who were very vocal in letting us know of their concerns, that they receive a copy of this to let them know that we did follow through and what the findings are, and I think that would be a good thing to do.
Will do.
Will do.
Thank you.
All right, so that no action needs to be taken on this, so we'll just, that's an information item. Item number 6.
Item number 6 is a presentation with Mark Llewellyn with Genesis on the Benny Russell Master Plan. He has in the backup 4 phases, and so at this time, I'll let Mark present.
My name is Mark Llewellyn, Sr. The taller, more handsome, smarter Mark Llewellyn Jr. is the one that knows all about Spencer Field, so don't ask me any questions about that, please. I'll do the best I can if you do. Here this morning to talk about the Benny Russell Park Master Plan. It's been a real pleasure working with the community and the staff and Commissioner Parker on this project, and I think it's been very successful. If I could go through a very brief presentation. I think you have this in your packet. We know the context, the location of the project. It's really strategically located in a growing neighborhood group of part of your community. It's continue to expand. On the west side is another D.R. Horton development. You see that shaded in there. That's on its way. Very active park. There's a beautiful little playground there. It's a fun place for kids and families to go visit. Right off of Royalette Road. The University of West Florida owns property to the north. That someday something's going to happen there. They're searching for funding, and so we really haven't incorporated much of that into that. But the possibility of connecting that property into the park is certainly available in the future. Next slide, please. Initial public meeting that we had in May of this year. We had a really interesting response. There weren't a whole lot of folks that attended the in-person meeting. We had over 450 responses, which allowed us to rank different facilities that were desired on that property. And you can see the top 10 that are listed there, ranging everything from interactive water player, another splash pad. We know we love those things, and kids just really enjoy them. Had a lot of success with those in parks, all the way down to skateboard park. Next slide, please. With the master plan we developed, we were able to accommodate the top 7 plus one. Interactive water play, the YMCA, Community Recreation Center, walking trails. You can read them. I don't need to read them too. The plus is really another playscape and a fun zone. I'll get into more detail on each of these elements as we go through. Next slide. Next slide, please. No, say where you are. I'm sorry. The east side. East side of the park, you can see where the existing facilities are, where the playscape is, the existing parking. It's a little odd configuration there for the existing parking, but it works and will continue to function. And you can see where we're connecting into that to expand the parking facilities. Directly to the west of the existing parking, we're proposing where the interactive water play area is and a new playscape. Stormwater has been identified as a big issue out here. We understand that and recognize that, so you'll see a lot of stormwater facilities here. My understanding is groundwater is high, and there's a lot of stormwater that flows through this area, and needs to be accommodated with whatever design takes place. This also includes a multi-purpose field and a number of picnic shelters there. The size of that field is the size of a football field, so it's a large field and it's just open space for open play. You also see Rolliette Road being extended to the west, some to tie in to points to the west, and connected additional parking that'll be part of the next slide. On the west side, that's where we're adding the access in, additional parking, providing internal connectivity between the park elements. We think that's really important so people can come and park and then walk between the elements. Stormwater facilities, again, a big issue there. And the YMCA. It's a placeholder for the YMCA. That was a big issue, a big discussion point, I would say, with the second public meeting. And also on that west side are the trails, the multi-use trails on the west side. There's an outer loop that's a half a mile, and so there's a lot of flexibility with how we can do the inner loops to get additional distances on that west side of the park and through the woods. Lots of flexibility of how that can be designed, and whether with a hard surface, which is what we would recommend initially. If that's not the case, it could be a hard packed surface and ultimately be paved if it's appropriate. Next slide. As discussed, this YMCA diagram was provided to us by an architect out of Louisiana. It's approximately 30,000 square feet. It's flexible in phasing also, and it meets it checks off all the boxes of the community survey that was done regarding the YMCA. So from that perspective, that community YMCA would fit the mold. It could be in multiple configurations. This is the one that we had from another site so I think it's in Louisiana. Next slide. And then go back one please. The last item there is internal park trails. I mentioned those already. And then the neighborhood connectivity to the west going over to Hamilton Lane, which will provide a trail access into this park from the communities to the west. One of the issues that came up in the second public meeting we had was connectivity on West Spencer Field to the north and potentially to the east here or to the west, because there's really no sidewalks on those neighborhood roadways, so families would have to commute or find a way there through the neighborhood streets. But they're narrow streets, and hopefully it would be safe enough for families to make their way there. But that may be an issue that you'll be confronted with in the future. Next slide. We've broken this down into multiple phases to accommodate budgetary things. 5 phases in total,
the fifth phase being the YMCA phase. Next slide. Phase 1, access and parking. You see what that all includes. It includes the interactive water play area. Phase 2, next slide. The play fields, the playscape space, family picnic pavilions, and some other facilities there. Ideally, I would think that phase 1 and 2 should go together construction-wise, but if the budget doesn't allow, it can be broken down like that. Phase 3 is the connection over to Hamilton Lane. Phase 4 are the multi-use trails on the west side, and then phase 5 is the YMCA site. The second public meeting was held on September 17th. It was well attended. We had 65 people sign in. There was a number of folks there interested in a swimming pool. I think the high school swim team came out in force, just right from practice with wet hair and ready to talk about swimming and the activities that they wanted to see. There's a lot of interest with the YMCA, but there's also interest in, again, connecting to the community and how that would best be facilitated. Didn't really hear any negative comments. I think there's a lot of positive responses there. I can go into more detail if you have any questions about the responses there with the public comment. So at this point, see where I am here. Next slide, please. Oh, talk about budget, don't we? Again, we're in a conceptual phase here. It's very preliminary conceptual. There's lots of flexibility with this and really what the county wants to invest in the park. Phase 1 is a fairly large investment because of the interactive water play area, the expansion of the parking, and other facilities that are there. Let me get to that sheet here if I can. If anybody has any questions about what specifically is in each one of these phases, I can go through that. Phase 2, Phase 3, Phase 4. So the total of those first 4 phases is $3,285,767. And then there's a 10% contingency we put on there, again, just to protect, because it's a conceptual phase that we're in, and a 10% design and permitting costs for that. For total phases 1 through 4, $3,943,000, which would implement all the elements in phase 1 through 4. Phase 5, with the 30,000 square foot YMCA, estimates are for that between $10 and $11 million. With the additional parking that's there and access points, that the total cost there about $11,230,000. And then there's a contingency and engineering and design fees associated with that. Major investment for the community, recognize that. It's a growing part of your county, and there's a lot of very positive input from the community on the project. So, all right. I can answer any questions.
Mr. Parker.
Yeah, I just want to point out the only thing that I appreciate Mark and the staff, and I sort of jump straight to the only thing I want to reiterate to the board and the public is the only thing we're looking at today are phases 1 through 4. You know, we were very upfront with the public that phase 5 will only exist if this public. I think I feel comfortable saying this. It's not going to exist unless the public tells us they want it to exist, along with traffic improvements and other things that'll be required by public action of a vote to support an additional half-cent sales tax. So since that's something that is a future possibility, you'll see in the backup only talked about phases 1 through 4, so that approximately $3.2 million price tag total. Today, though, really the only thing that we wanted to ask the board to do, other than be able to see the presentation, is to consider funding, design, and permitting fees. So the estimate here, and I believe this is an estimation, we would still have to go through the process, is around $300,000. And so I just want to bring that back to perspective. There's going to be nothing, best case scenario, that I asked for from the board today that would be over about that $300,000 mark. And I just want to put that clearly, so the numbers don't run away from us. I can assure you that if the board will support us on moving forward with the design and construction plans, there's quite a few things that I think Genesis has always, and you would want them to do, of, under promise and over deliver sort of concept, is I think some of these estimates are a little high. And I say that with an appreciation. I would rather you give it to me high than low. So I think we'll be able to bring the cost down on phase one. Just some of the things, I look through, like the pavilions and the picnic tables and things like that. The cost-wise that, will hopefully garner some savings that we could look at and then apply to future phases. But that would be my request to the board today, would be that we go ahead and fund the design and permitting side of it. And then, it's sort of one step at a time. I don't know if Dan has any input on that, or is looking at me.
The only thing I would add, sir, is to Mark's point and your point, I am working with the CEO of YMCA Northwest Florida to bring expanded YMCA services to Santa Rosa County. We have a Y down in Navarre that's very successful, and they're looking at expanding that Y now. We're looking at a Y location here in North Pace, and then potentially a future YMCA location in Gulf Breeze. So it's more than, that's why I asked Mark to separate it out. It's the YMCA services is bigger than just Benny Russell Park, and that would be a separate request and a separate public-private partnership that I would expect would come to the board before the end of the year.
My only comment would be, I like the idea, I like the concept of moving forward design. I'd be a little hesitant in wanting to do permitting until we knew where the cost of construction was coming from. I don't want to spend money on permitting and then those lapse. Anybody can help me with that, I'm okay.
Just a question for Commissioner Parker. Are you proposing to use district rec funds for the design and permitting fees?
I was, and
then I support it.
I don't know. I don't know how you say this and it not be funny, but I always open the invitation, and I only say that based on the history of the park. And I mean, it can't be under or overstated when I go back and read minutes from 2004, 2006 timeframe that this park wouldn't be in existence if not only for the Mary Fortune family and the hundreds of volunteers, but also I believe that was Commissioner Robert Hilliard, who's now Judge Hilliard, that partnered with Commissioner Salter, and they wouldn't. So this park, as well as the baseball park, that it was Commissioner Salter again and Commissioner Williamson, the late Jim Williamson, wouldn't be in existence if it wouldn't have been through collaboration. And so I say that as if that's something that Commissioner Salter wants to continue on this phase portion, then I would obviously openly accept it. But either way, I'd be prepared. That was going to be, whether it's South Pace or North Pace, South Pace together, somehow we'll get it there with the district funds. Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Salter, I'm waiting for this answer.
Stop, Commissioner Parker. You're making me cry. I'll be happy to get with Jane. I've got a big project up in Fidelis that I've committed $200,000 to for a grant, matching grant. But I'll be happy to get with Jane and see what percentage I have left. But I would like to be able to partner with you. I just need to find out how much funds I have.
Thank you, sir. And I would say then my request today, so that we can actually get to move forward, would be that we go ahead and I would ask, make a motion without objection that out of District 1 funds, we can move forward with engineering, design, and permitting. And at a later date, if Commissioner Salter finds out that even if he could pay a third of it, that would be extremely helpful. And we could always, I believe, do that as a budget amendment. And so I'm getting the head shake yes, and that would be my request.
Mr. Chairman, I would ask Commissioner Parker to go ahead and include District 3 in a part of the funding as well.
So no, Commissioner Williamson's going to throw in something here.
I just thought it was interesting that we had, I'm glad to hear that we had sticker shock on a $6.9 million park in Navarre, but a $17.5 million park in Pace, we're good with. So I think since the media is here, that maybe we should let them know that the only part we're talking about today is the 3.9 million, not the 17.5, because experience would tell me that if 17.5 million hits the newspaper, you may get a few phone calls and emails on your park project. Yes, yeah, you might get a few, I don't know, just a couple.
Well, I appreciate it. This is
But
one
I
of
love
those.
the project, and I think it looks great, and it's going to be well-received, and I support it 100%.
I appreciate your forethought on this, honestly, of bringing big projects forward. And I've
It's going to be a heck of a park.
for a lack of a better terms, I'm going to
Somebody
say,
once said that. It's going to be a heck of a park.
I'm going to say I've tried to learn from everything this board's done, whether it be good or bad. And that's why I put out there initially, we are not even discussing an $11 million YMCA at this point. This is a $3 million project. And this will be great. And I look forward to bringing this to the elected board at the Pace Water System. Mr. Jorgensen had stated the obvious reason we're going to ask Pace to really help us out, which could drive this cost significantly down if they're going to be willing to help us with the discharge rather than having to rechlorinate and everything.
All right, sounds good. So, Mandy, you got all that? Think so? All right. All right. Restate your motion, please, sir.
Man, they're going to have District 2 and 4 rec funds in the minutes. No, we're just going to put a motion without objection to fund the engineering, design, and permitting portion, which the estimate is $328,576.70, but I believe we'll go through the procurement process or whatever we've got to do as far as the task order on the reoccurrence. So, but we're going to fund that out of a portion of that, or wholly out of District 1 and District 3 rec funding, and we'll figure out the apportionment at a later date, but I would recommend we move that to the consent agenda.
So moved. All right. Final item there, Roger. Knock it out.
Item number 7 is a discussion and our recommendation of approval for the annual certified budget for mosquito control for submission to Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, FDACS. This is for our arthropod control for fiscal year 2018-19. Recommend including it on the consent agenda.
So moved without objection. All right. Thank you, Roger. Public Service Committee, Commissioner Williamson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Item number 1 of 3 items today, discussion of contractual agreement for veterinarian services. The animal shelter, I believe, as the backup says, that we approved 50,000 cap for the next fiscal year, and the item in front of you very responsibly says not to exceed 25,000. I know since we previously approved the 50, if the board wanted to give that discretion to the county administrator to go up to that amount, I would be comfortable with it, but that's the item you have before you. Dan?
We attempted to procure veterinarian services and got 0 responses, so Brad and Dale have entered into some negotiations with individual vets to provide services, and I think this trial period will tell us, you know, is this the way we go forward from here?
Okay. There's no comments or questions from the staff. This gets us through the first 6 months.
So moved.
All right, move that to the consent agenda on Thursday. Item number 2 is discussion of approval resolution authorizing the grant we do for EMS. Funding amount this year would be $21,490. If there's no questions or concerns, I would ask that we move this item to Thursday's consent agenda without objection.
So moved.
And lastly, we have lost funds for fire district purchase, combining Holly Navarre and Navarre Beach Fire Department's requests, $122,055.05. Just make sure we get things moving for them in this upcoming fiscal year, and it's paid for from lost funding for equipment. If there's no questions or concerns, I would move this to Thursday's consent agenda without objection.
Seeing none, so moved.
That concludes the report, sir.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Chairman, we have a visitor.
They want to clarify that so Holly Navarre doesn't think they can miss the next meeting. So Holly Navarre is going to bring a request forward in November to the Loss Committee to ask them to reallocate next year's fund, which they were going to purchase a boat with, to this year so they can acquire some air packs. So this request is solely for Navarre Beach, and it was part of the master plan the fire department executive group brought forward. But MES is, knowing that they've purchased and going to purchase future packs for Holly Navarre, they have reduced the amount, thus allowing us. So this purchase is only for Navarre Beach, and then Holly Navarre will come to the Loss Committee to ask for those reallocation of money, which then will come back to you.
Okay, so on Thursday, we'll have an adjusted or an amended amount that will be Navarre Beach only, or is Navarre
This
Beach
is
portion
Navarre
the
Beach only.
122?
That's
So
correct.
This is the right amount.
Okay.
I just want to clarify that, so if people from the Holly Navarre Fire District was thinking that approval had already went, this amount is for Navarre Beach only, and the discounted rate above the contract pricing is based on future purchases from Holly Navarre as well. So
Okay. I must have misread. I apologize. I thought it was combining the two together. So it doesn't, I don't believe it would change the motion, though. Is it correct? Okay. Thank you for that clarification.
Thank you for your report. This time, we'll turn to Commissioner Salter for Public Works.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 3 items. First is discussion of renewal of work squad contract W1036 with the Department of Corrections for 1 work squad. The renewal period is for an additional 3 years ending February 2022. Any discussion by the board? Hearing none, I would recommend moving this to Thursday's consent agenda.
Seeing
Without
none, so
objection.
moved. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Number 2, discussion of approval of the resurfacing of the following roads in District 1 with lost and gas tax funding. This list is made available in our backup. It's on our webpage. I will not read all the roads unless the board wants me to, but it's a total of 17 roads in District 1. Total from lost funds is $249,600. Total from the gas tax funds is $260,820, totaling 17 roads, and I would move these to Thursday's consent agenda without objection.
Seeing none, so moved.
Next is discussion of resurfacing paving of the following roads in District 2 with funding from loss and gas tax revenues. It's a total of 21 roads, $248,500 coming out of the loss fund, $307,500 coming out of the gas tax fund, totaling 21 roads. Here again, they're in the backup. They're on our webpage. I would move these roads to Thursday's consent agenda without objection.
Hearing none, so moved.
That concludes my report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Commissioner Lyncher, bring us home.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have 30 items. Item number 1, discussion of approval of a bid from Volume Print for the new Santa Rosa County Visitors Guide brochures and envelopes as requested by the Tourist Development Office. The bid tabs and backup are in your agenda. Any questions or comments? If not, I will move this to Thursday's consent agenda without objection.
So moved.
Item 2 is discussion of approval of a bid from Vulcan Inc. for signs and reflective sheeting materials as requested by the Public Works Department. Again, the backup is in your agenda. Any questions or comments? If not, I'll move this to Thursday's consent agenda without objection.
So moved.
Items 3 through 29 are carry forwards, recognitions of funding and awards, rollovers, and matching grant amounts with the FY 2019 budget. Are there any questions about individual items 3 through 29? Jane, any of those in particular I need to go over? All right, then I will move these to Thursday's consent agenda without objection.
So moved.
And item 30 is the check register. Mr. Chairman, I'll review that and have it on your desk for Thursday. So I'll move that to Thursday's consent agenda without objection.
So moved.
And that concludes the budget report.
Thank you, Commissioner Lynchard. This time, I'll open the floor to the public forum. Seeing anybody from the general public who would like to comment to the Board of Commissioners. Any further comments from staff? Seeing none, we are adjourned.
Lane, I just want to say you are much better budget chair than I was.